Something is lurking beneath the surface of the ocean. It's enormous. It's powerful. And if you're not careful, it could swallow you whole. Close encounters with whales have been reported all around the world, from kayakers in Chile nearly vanishing into a whale's jaws to divers narrowly escaping a mouth the size of a house. These moments remind us just how vulnerable we are in the water. Most people get away unharmed, but it sparks a terrifying question. What if you didn't? What if you were actually swallowed by a whale? Would you suffocate in the darkness? Would stomach acid dissolve your skin? Or could you, by some miracle, survive long enough to tell the tale? This is What If, and today we're diving deep into one of the ocean's most terrifying possibilities. What if you were swallowed by a whale? The Science Explained. The scale of the blue whale. Before we explore the nightmare scenario of being swallowed, let's take a moment to understand just how massive these creatures really are. If you've never stood beside a whale, it's almost impossible to picture their true size. The blue whale holds the crown as the largest animal ever to exist on Earth. Yes, even bigger than the largest dinosaurs. A full-grown blue whale can reach over 30 meters in length. That's about the size of 3 school buses lined up end to end. Its heart alone is the size of a small car, weighing close to 200 kilograms, and with each beat it pumps hundreds of gallons of blood. Then there's its tongue, an organ so huge that it weighs as much as an elephant. Its mouth could easily hold 400 to 500 people standing side by side. To a swimmer in the open ocean, a blue whale's mouth would look like a cavern opening beneath your feet. For centuries, sailors told tales of ships being swallowed by monsters at sea, and when you look at a blue whale up close, it's easy to see how those stories began. But here's the twist: despite their enormous size, blue whales are gentle giants. They're filter feeders, surviving on billions of tiny krill each day. Their throats are surprisingly narrow, about the width of a grapefruit. That means, ironically, a blue whale couldn't swallow a human even if it tried. So while they are the undisputed giants of the ocean, they are not the predators we should be worried about. Enter the sperm whale. The real danger comes from a very different kind of whale, the sperm whale. Unlike blue whales, sperm whales are hunters. They dive thousands of meters into the darkest corners of the ocean to battle colossal squid. They are armed with rows of massive teeth, each one about the size of a chef's knife, and their throats, large enough to swallow a human whole. This is where myth, legend, and science collide, because over a century ago, a story began to spread. A story of a man who supposedly survived this impossible fate. His name was James Bartley, and according to reports from 1891, he was swallowed alive by a whale during a whaling expedition, and somehow lived to tell the tale. But was it true? Could anyone actually survive such a horrifying ordeal? To answer that, we'll need to dive into the legend of James Bartley and then put his story under the microscope of modern science. It's the year 1891. A whaling ship called the Star of the East sails off the coast of the Falkland Islands, hunting the ocean's giants in the icy waters of the South Atlantic. For the crew, it was just another dangerous day at sea. But for one sailor, James Bartley, it would become the day that defined his life and the story that would echo across the globe. According to the reports, the crew harpooned a massive sperm whale. The animal thrashed violently, its enormous tail whipping the waves like thunder. During the chaos, Bartley was thrown overboard and disappeared beneath the water. His shipmates searched desperately, but no trace of him could be found. Eventually, they assumed the worst, that the sea had claimed another victim. But the story didn't end there. The following day, the crew managed to kill the whale and haul its body alongside the ship. As they began cutting into the enormous carcass, they made a shocking discovery. Inside the whale's stomach, they found an unconscious but living James Bartley, the survivor. When they pulled him out, Bartley's skin was ghostly pale, almost bleached white. His arms and face were blistered and scarred, as though he had been burned. Some accounts even claimed that he had gone blind, his eyes permanently damaged by the stomach's corrosive acids. Despite his horrific condition, he survived, and as the tale spread through newspapers and journals across Europe and America, James Bartley became known as the modern Jonah, a man who had endured the impossible, living proof of one of the Bible's most famous stories. People were fascinated. If Bartley's story was true, it meant that the ancient tale of Jonah surviving inside a whale for 3 days might not be so far-fetched after all. For religious readers, it was a miracle. For adventurers, it was a tale of human endurance. And for scientists, it was a mystery that demanded answers. The doubts, but as the years passed, cracks began to appear in the story. Historians noticed that the Star of the East was indeed a real ship, but official records made no mention of James Bartley in its crew. Skeptics pointed out that even if a man were swallowed whole, the stomach acids of a sperm whale would do more than just bleach his skin. They would dissolve him entirely. Others asked, how could someone possibly breathe inside a stomach with no oxygen and only toxic gases filling the space? Was Bartley's story a case of fact? Or was it a piece of fiction, invented to thrill newspaper readers at the end of the 19th century? The truth is, we may never know for certain whether James Bartley actually existed, or if he was just the invention of a clever journalist. But what we can do is use science to test whether survival inside a whale is even remotely possible, from myth to science. And this is where things get truly fascinating. Because once we step away from the legend and begin looking at the biology of sperm whales, the reality becomes darker and far more terrifying than any story. If you were unlucky enough to be swallowed whole by a sperm whale, you wouldn't be pulled out the next morning with bleached skin. No, the journey inside a whale's body would be a horrifying sequence of pain, suffocation, and digestion. So let's strip away the myth and break down exactly what would happen, step by step, if you found yourself sliding past the teeth of a sperm whale and into its abyss, like throat. So, let's imagine it. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and suddenly the jaws of a sperm whale open around you. The light from the surface vanishes as the world goes dark, and you're dragged into one of nature's most terrifying traps. The teeth. The first thing you'd encounter would be the whale's teeth. Unlike blue whales, which have baleen plates for filtering tiny krill, sperm whales are predators. Their jaws are lined with 40 to 50 teeth, each one about 20 centimeters long, roughly the size of a chef's knife. These teeth interlock like a bear trap, snapping shut with tremendous force. If you were unlucky, those teeth would slice through your skin, breaking bones and tearing muscle before you even entered the throat. But let's say, by some miracle, you slipped past them mostly intact. Your nightmare would only just be beginning. The throat. You'd find yourself sliding into the whale's throat. And here's something unsettling. Sperm whales are among the only whales whose throats are large enough to swallow a human whole. The passage would be slick, slimy, and crushingly tight. Muscular walls would constrict around you, forcing you deeper with every contraction. Breathing would quickly become impossible. There would be almost no oxygen inside this tunnel, and the little air that remained would be mixed with methane gas from the whale's digestive system. Every gulp of breath would fill your lungs with a toxic cocktail that would make you dizzy and disoriented. The deeper you went, the darker it would become. Absolute blackness. The only sounds, the pounding of your own heartbeat, and the groaning echoes of the whale's massive body around you. The first stomach eventually, you'd be dropped into the first of the whale's 4 stomachs. This is where the real suffering would begin. The stomach would be hot, humid, and suffocating. Temperatures could climb above 40 degrees Celsius, 14 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the chamber into a living sauna. Around you, stomach juices would start splashing and burning your skin. These acids are strong enough to break down squid and fish, so human flesh would be no exception. At first, your skin would blister and peel, your eyes would sting and burn, forcing them shut. Every breath would scorch your throat, filling your lungs with rancid, poisonous air. And yet, this is only the beginning of the digestive process. In the darkness, you might catch faint flashes of light. Sperm whales hunt bioluminescent squid, and sometimes those unlucky creatures end up glowing inside the whale's stomach. For a few fleeting moments, you might see eerie blue or green pulses flickering in the slime around you. But this strange light show would be of little comfort, because you wouldn't last long enough to enjoy it. The inevitable within minutes, the combined effects of suffocation, heat, and acid burns would overwhelm your body. Your oxygen-starved brain would begin shutting down. Your skin would slough off in patches, and every nerve ending would scream in agony as the acids broke through deeper tissue. If James Bartley had truly been swallowed, he wouldn't have come out alive and bleached. He wouldn't have come out at all. The brutal truth is that no human could endure this descent into darkness, not even for an hour, let alone an entire night. But as horrifying as the first stomach is, it's only one part of the whale's digestive system. Because if you somehow remained intact long enough, you'd soon be passed along to stomach number 2. And what happens there makes this nightmare even worse. If somehow, by a miracle of endurance, you survived the first stomach, your nightmare wouldn't end there. It would only get worse. Because a sperm whale doesn't just have one stomach. It has 4, and each one is designed to do something different, all working together to break down even the toughest prey. The second stomach, the grinding chamber, from the acidic soup of the first chamber, you'd be squeezed into the second stomach. This is the whale's version of a giant pressure cooker. Unlike cows or sheep, which chew cud to grind their food, sperm whales swallow massive, writhing squid whole. The second stomach handles the job of breaking that down. Inside, the muscular walls churn violently, smashing prey against each other, like clothes tumbling in a washing machine. But instead of soap and water, this chamber is filled with digestive enzymes. These enzymes break down proteins and fats, turning once living flesh into a soupy paste. For you, the experience would be unimaginable. Every violent contraction would crush your ribs, rupture organs, and snap bones. Your body would be twisted and compressed until you were no more than a fragile shell of yourself. And while this was happening, enzymes would continue to eat away at your skin and muscles, reducing you to something unrecognizable. The third stomach, the dissolver, after being churned into pulp, your remains would slip into the third stomach. This is where the process of complete dissolution begins. Here, the enzymes intensify. Any solid structures, cartilage, muscle, fat, would be liquefied and broken down into molecules small enough to be absorbed by the whale's body. It wouldn't matter if you were human, squid, or shark. In this chamber, you'd all end up the same, a bubbling broth of nutrients. If you'd had bones strong enough to resist up to this point, this is where they would finally dissolve. Calcium, iron, and phosphorus from your skeleton would be extracted and repurposed. Your identity, your humanity, your physical form, all of it would vanish into the chemical chaos. The fourth stomach, the absorber, the final stomach, is less about destruction and more about absorption. By the time food reaches here, it's already reduced to a liquid slurry of nutrients. The lining of this chamber absorbs sugars, amino acids, and fats, delivering them into the whale's bloodstream. This means that if you had made it this far, and by now, that's physically impossible, you would no longer exist in any recognizable form. You'd be transformed into energy to fuel the whale's massive dives into the abyss, to help it sing its haunting sonar calls, to keep its gigantic heart beating. In short, you'd become part of the whale. Your body would stop being you and start being whale muscle, whale blubber, whale life. The escape myth stories like James Bartley's suggest survival is possible. But once you understand the stomach system of a whale, you realize there's no way out. No amount of luck, prayer, or struggle could carry a human body through this gauntlet alive. Even if you were swallowed whole and uninjured, you'd face suffocation in the throat, acid burns in the first stomach, bone-crushing contractions in the second, and total dissolution in the third and fourth. Every escape story falls apart when stacked against the brutal reality of whale biology. The final truth: so, what if you were swallowed by a whale? The truth is, you wouldn't just disappear. You'd be digested, absorbed, and transformed into fuel for one of the largest animals on Earth. And perhaps that's the strangest thought of all: that your journey wouldn't end inside the whale, but continue, invisibly, as part of the creature that consumed you. So now that we've traveled, step by step, through the terrifying anatomy of a sperm whale, and imagined what it would really be like to be swallowed, there's only one question left. What does this all mean for us? Because sure, the science is clear. You wouldn't survive the experience. But stories of humans being eaten by whales keep resurfacing across history, from sailors' legends to religious texts to modern viral videos. Why do we keep telling these tales, and why do they capture our imagination so strongly? Whales in myth and legend. Throughout history, whales have been symbols of both fear and awe. In the Bible, Jonah was famously swallowed by a great fish, only to be spit back out 3 days later. To some, this story symbolized punishment and redemption, while others saw it as proof of divine intervention. In Polynesian mythology, whales were revered as guardians of the ocean. They weren't monsters, but protectors, giants that kept balance in the seas. And in sailors' lore, during the Age of Exploration, whales were feared as sea dragons, creatures that could sink ships and devour men whole. Even today, movies like Pinocchio and documentaries on sperm whales continue to portray these animals as mysterious beings that exist on the edge between reality and legend. The idea of being swallowed by a whale isn't just about death. It's about surrender, transformation, and survival. Themes humans have been fascinated with for centuries. Why we fear the deep. The whale swallowing myth also ties into a deeper fear: the ocean itself. More than 80% of the world's oceans remain unexplored. We've mapped the surface of Mars more thoroughly than the floor of our own seas. When you're standing at the shoreline, staring out into endless blue, it's hard not to imagine what lurks beneath. And whales, giant, unseen, yet undeniably real, become perfect vessels for that fear. They are reminders that no matter how advanced we become, there are still creatures out there that dwarf us in size, power, and mystery. Science vs. stories, but science grounds us. It reminds us that whales are not villains, nor are they interested in making us their meals. Sperm whales dive thousands of meters below the surface in search of giant squid. They're hunters of the deep, not of humans. If one ever did accidentally scoop you up, it wouldn't be because you looked tasty. It would be a mistake, a side effect of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yet, despite what science tells us, we cling to the possibility. Why? Because stories of survival, like James Bartley's, let us flirt with the impossible. They let us imagine that somehow, through luck or fate, a human could endure something that should have been certain death. The what if beyond. So, what if you were swallowed by a whale? The truth is, you'd never return. You'd suffocate, dissolve, and disappear. Your body absorbed into the life of the ocean giant. But maybe the point of asking this question isn't about survival at all. It's about exploring fear, testing the limits of imagination, and confronting the power of nature. Because every time we wonder, what if? We aren't just asking about whales, we're asking about ourselves. How small are we compared to the universe? How fragile are our bodies in the face of nature? And how far will our curiosity take us, even into the belly of a beast? Final reflection, in the end, whales are not monsters. They're gentle, intelligent giants that play a vital role in keeping our oceans healthy. But they also remind us of something greater, that Earth is still full of mysteries we don't fully understand. And maybe that's why the idea of being swallowed by a whale continues to fascinate us. It's not just a nightmare scenario, it's a mirror showing us our fears, our myths, and our endless hunger to know more. So the next time you hear the call of the ocean, remember the chances of a whale swallowing you are basically zero. But the chances of your imagination diving into that possibility, well, that's almost guaranteed.